Welcome to Restore the Glory podcast. My name is Jake Kim.
And I'm Bob Schutz.
We're two Catholic therapists sharing what we've learned personally and professionally to help you on the journey of restoration. If you've been blessed by our podcast, please prayerfully consider partnering with us on Patreon. Your support will help cover the cost to produce the podcast, but will also give you access to exclusive content like monthly reflections and special live stream teachings. Go to patreon.com/restore the glory and join the mission of experiencing the restoration of our God-given glory. Hey, Bob, good to see you again. We are in our series here on adoption, and we have some amazing guests with us. If it's okay with you, Bob, I'd love to take a stab at introducing them. So this is a couple that I have known for a very long time, and I would like to say that I have some part in their marriage, and that's my claim to fame, that I have a subtle part, and really my wife has a part in their marriage. So I'm super happy to have Chris and Michelle Benzinger with us. Chris and Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted to get into and hear about your guys' story around adoption, but just a little bit about the two of you. Chris, you have worked in church ministry for what feels like forever, and now are doing both, it feels like, church ministry as well as leadership consulting in the world. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, that's right. The mission field has just expanded beyond specifically working for churches. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris, I would say, like anybody out there, listeners who are looking for a top-notch leadership consultant, disciple, they don't get better than Chris. So we'll put his website and stuff there, but that's just a plug. That's not really where we're going.
Yeah. And Chris has been helping us as a ministry, JP2 Healing Center. So I support that with my life.
Thank you, Bob.
And then Michelle, you do this. I think you're on do a podcast or something. It's called Abiding with the Weather, or Abiding.
I think it's called Abiding Together.
What is
it's
that
just
called?
a little women's podcast that I do with your wife's a part of it too. So yeah. Sister
I've
Miriam.
heard of that.
Yeah.
That's what she does when she goes into that
Yeah.
room. Okay. Yeah. Basically, you're the reason that Restore the Glory has any success, because you mentioned us on your podcast and all your listeners thought, hey, let's give these dorks a try. But okay. So thank you both for being with us. So I just want to get right into it. So I'll share the setup, and then maybe you can talk us through. So you're married, you have kids, and then I catch wind. I don't even remember why, but I catch this story of, we want to adopt children. And this is right after a lot of the dynamics and the struggles, at least in my storyline, about the massive earthquake in Haiti had happened. You guys are world missionaries. You've been going all over the world and doing missions. And this is how the story looked to me. And Chris, I'd love for you to fill in all the gaps here to tell us. And then all of a sudden I go, what? I hear the story that you are adopting two children and you're bringing them home, and then their ages are different. They're not infants. And it was just like in shock. And I hear these such amazing stories about Chris, you flying down to meet them, and Michelle pulling her hair out of just trying to love everybody well. So can you just start us off, Chris, with one, why did you want to adopt? And then two, what happened in the initial parts of that story? Because this is unique in the adoption of your two.
Yes. Well, to be clear, we did not want to adopt, and we did not want to adopt from Haiti. I know what you mean. Like the desire wasn't this big desire to adopt.
Okay.
If you think back to maybe December of 2009, we have 4 children. Our oldest is about to turn 7, I believe. And Michelle looks at me and says, Chris, we got to slow this train down.
We got to really learn NFP really well,
overwhelmed.
because
Right. I'm overwhelmed. And then 2 weeks later, the second week of January, is the earthquake that happens in Haiti. And, they don't even know, over 200,000 people passed away in that earthquake, and people lost, husbands and fathers and moms and kids and all kinds of people. And we had a friend who was a nurse who flew down into Haiti, and just on a private plane, and they made a set up a clinic, and people were just bringing all kinds of children, and they were and a nurse friend that we knew that we were supporting down there called and said, "Hey, we have these 2 children, and can you help us find a home for them?" And we just thought, well, sure. We've helped place other adoptions. Michelle's helped with 2 other placements, and we were in ministry. We knew lots of generous people that would probably open their homes. And just a few days later, we were working at the camp at the time up at Cove Crest in North Georgia, and I went down to check on the group there and who was using the camp as a retreat center. I came back Saturday afternoon. All our 4 children must have been napping, and I come home to Michelle with her I can still see her cross-legged on the couch, cell phone in her hand, weeping. And I had grown to know that look, and that look was God had moved in her heart. And this family for these 2 children was to us and an overwhelmed mom. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I felt like I probably didn't, maybe I'm over spiritualizing this. I felt like I dropped to my knees and, but I was more just, oh my gosh. I know what this is. I have no idea what this is going to mean, but I know that it means it's us. Wow. And had no idea what the journey was going to be. So that's how it really, it wasn't.
No.
You weren't looking to adopt.
No, and that's what I mean when I say want. We were not looking for it at all. Okay. It found us. And I think that one of the beautiful things I really appreciate in Michelle is that she told me early on in our relationship, she was that kind of the sundress missionary. But what I learned is that when God speaks to her, she'll be obedient no matter what. And so I knew that this was one of those times.
Wow. Michelle, can you bring us into that?
Yeah, I think we weren't looking, and the Lord delivered to us. And I'll still get emotional about it because people still say to us, because I always tell people when they said, "Hey, we're praying about adoption," I'm like, you better know that it better be a call from God, because it gets messy and it gets ugly, but there's nothing more beautiful. But it is going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done. It is, because it's just a major healing, because it's a primal wound, that happens, that attachment from your biological parents to other. But people will say, "Oh, you guys are so this for taking in these 2 kids. You must be they must feel like they're so lucky." And probably there's gratitude, but they don't really feel like they're lucky. But I'm like, they didn't need us, I think, as much as we needed them. We needed them. Wow. It has been a journey of joint restoration. I don't think the Lord would reveal his pursuit of love, the Father's love, to watch Chris go down there. And I mean, someone asked me the other day, what are some of the things I love about my husband? And one of them is because I get a crazy idea that we're supposed to adopt the kids, and he gets on a plane a couple days later and does it. Not me. I didn't go down there. He did, but wow. It's such a pursuit of watching the Father's love in real time, especially watching him with our oldest daughter. There's a trust in him more so. She trusts him probably more so than any other person, more than me. She goes to Chris, wow. And she not only does she go to Chris, she'll go to Chris's dad. There's something about the attachment that she has to both of them. There's just this deep attachment to both of them,
If I could interject something, just as an explanation, oftentimes a child has a harder time attaching with mom after that trauma than with dad, because mom represents everything about attachment, right? And safety and connection. And so for a mom, that's a really painful place for a mom who's adopted a baby to see that these children have a hard time attaching from their hearts because of that. And then to see, again, because Chris is a safe person and his dad's a safe person, but they're men. And it isn't quite as threatening for that attachment with a man than it is for a mom.
And you have to realize our daughter was 14 when we got her. I was about to say, I think our youngest right now is 14.
Yep.
And and she's our other daughter. And we are super attached. I couldn't imagine Lily leaving right now and someone else raising her. It would just blow my mind.
What was Alguine and David's story? What was their experience when you guys come into the scene? What had they just suffered? Chris, what'd you walk into?
Yeah, what happened is we found out later that their mom actually kind of abandoned them before even the earthquake. So they were staying with relatives, and it was the relatives that brought them to the clinic and said, we can't care for them at this point. So they're not dealing with this wound of my mom was tragically killed. It's my mom didn't want me.
Mhm.
Oh. And did their mom survive?
Well, we found out years later, yes, she did. And so it was very,
Okay.
It was very, like, there's lots of twists and turns.
If I'm trying to connect to their story, they were abandoned by their mother and given to other family members. Then this national tragedy, they're looking at their world literally crumbles around them. And then their family who they were given to gives them away a second. So there's two abandonments there, and their world crumbles. And they're now sitting in just how I visualize it, they're sitting in a tent or in a very poorly put together housing thing. And Chris, you fly into Haiti because Michelle says, these are our kids now. And I guess I'm filling in blanks. And Chris, you fly, you know people on the ground because of your mission experience and connection with nurses and stuff. And so, Chris, what is this like when you walk in and Michelle's like, those are our kids? Like, what's going on for you when you land in Haiti and are like, what's happening?
Right. So we were on one of the early flights that when they finally opened up the commercial airport. And in fact, people the week before had to fly into Dominican Republic and go across the border. And the airport, just they took all the bags and they just threw them. There's this huge pile of bags in an airport hangar. You couldn't go. No one was inside. I would say everyone, even the well-to-do people, were sleeping outside in tents. So we land in this airport, and there's people everywhere. The people outside, we didn't know who was even gonna. We had a name of who was gonna pick us up, but there were thousands of people, almost like rushing the gates of these people coming in because we represent help. We represent aid. These people don't have water. They don't have food. They don't. It was literally out of a movie. And fortunately, the people that were picking us up found us. And so the driver, the nurse, and then Alguine and David were with her. Once we got outside the crowd, then I met David and Alguine for the first time. And it was, it's hard to describe this feeling of like, Lord, I've been commissioned, and yet I have no idea what that means. And I know that they don't either. Oh. So it's like, yay. And Michelle and I both had talked with or said hello to Alguine and David on the phone before getting there.
Right.
So there was this at least a kind of sense of they had some familiarity. And I would say, just to extend, I don't think that the Lord initially said that we were going to adopt them even. It was like, will you welcome them into your heart?
Oh, wow.
And that was the call, at least for me personally. It was like, and so I went down there 5 times over the course of 17 months, and had these crazy experiences, thousands of dollars in my pocket, like trying to find lawyers, trying to find anybody that will help us to make this happen. Everybody on this side is saying, government and adoption agencies, they shut down adoption. They say, don't trust anybody down there. But the Lord just kept saying, do everything you can do and I'll take care of the rest. Do everything you can do and I'll take care of the rest. And so I just went down over and over. And fortunately we had, Father Louis Morozny, which is his family is really where our kids stayed during that time, with his family. And we couldn't have done it without them and their family. And we also couldn't have done it without the support of our whole community at Life Teen and friends like Jake and Heather. And, so yeah, it was really hard to, that initial moment, it was, will you open your heart to them? And
wow.
So
you're not even thinking about adopting, really. What I'm hearing you say is you're going down to support 2 kids because you have a friend on the ground, front line, seeing the devastation, and these 2 kids kind of emerge to her, and she turns to you. And so now, Chris, you're just trying to go down and bless them and love them as a father. And it sounds like, Michelle, on your heart, you're slowly hearing, I think these are supposed to be ours, but that it wasn't like, Chris, the first time you met them, I'm your new dad. Like, that wasn't the experience.
It was, my sense is that we would adopt them.
Okay.
But the commissioning or the call was, will you welcome them into your heart?
Wow.
Like, there was never a promise of adoption, especially when there were roadblocks every step of the way. There were illnesses, there were like education issues, there were, all kinds of document issues.
And they don't speak English.
Yeah. They don't
I remember
speak
that
English.
part.
I remember one of the only times I went down there once, Chris, during the process. Twice. I went down twice in the process. Yeah, once. Gretchen and George came with me once. I went myself. And so I remember the second time, and the kids tested positive for tuberculosis. So they had to go through medicine, and they had to do that before they'll let them in for immigration and all of this. Well, David is young. Like, he is less than 2 years old. So I'm spending time with him at the orphanage, but he doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Creole. So I remember leaving him the second time, and I'm holding him. And I had just gotten him to be able to trust me, where I could hold him, where he wouldn't squirm and all that kind of stuff. And I remember having to leave him and hand him off to the women that were in the orphanage and get in the truck and drive to the airport. And it was horrific. And I just remember the whole way down to the airport in this truck and these back roads and getting on the plane. And I'm just wrestling with God. I'm like, if this is your plan, it stinks. This is horrific. Handing this kid over you. Why would you ask me that? Why would you do this to him? Why would you do this to us? It's just just handing him over and trusting and not knowing and not being there when they're sick and taking care of him, even though they were getting an amazing care at the orphanage. Those people loved him. When it was finalized, they were bawling that he had to leave. They loved both the kids. But, and I remember getting on the airplane, walking in the aisle of the plane, putting my carry-on up. And I'm like, Lord, why would you ask me of this? And I remember it was one of those times where, it's where you get a sense of the Lord's voice, almost not audibly, but it's so clear in your spirit. The Lord's because that's how I feel about you. I would pursue you to the ends of the earth to make sure that you know that you're a part of a family. And it was one thing after another. And it was after one disappointment, the Lord would do a miracle, and that was one of our sayings, while we were going through the process, expect miracles, expect miracles. And it would be a roadblock and then a miracle, a roadblock, then a miracle, the whole entire process, And so the adoption process is exhausting. And I will tell people that are going through the adoption process now, it is the hardest labor and delivery you will ever have, because when you're doing it biological, it has to end after 9 months. Adoption, it could go on forever, special international. So it is the hardest labor and delivery. But it expands your heart. I think that's what Chris and I learned in this process. It expanded our hearts to be able to welcome them home into our family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So bring us to the point where they're there with you and what it's like just the first weeks, first months.
Yeah. So I remember there being in Haiti. We finally got all the documentation done, hoping that the lawyer, comes through. We're at the airport. The lawyer's late. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have no recourse if he doesn't show up. What do I do? And so finally he shows up, and we get on the plane, and we fly through Miami. And I always wondered, traveling international, doing mission trips, the people that get pulled out of the customs and immigration line and have to go in the box.
Yeah.
And we were those people. And, for a couple hours, and they have all of our paperwork, and they're going through everything. And I have these 2 kids, and I had another woman that cared for them down there come back with us. And then, so finally it all works out, last minute, I thought, if it doesn't happen now, we're going to miss our flight. We go into Atlanta. There are 100 people there with friends and family who are greeting us at the airport. With homes that say in Creole, welcome home, welcome home. And that was a powerful, powerful moment. And, we've been keeping people in touch with the whole, and in the end, I'd always end it expect miracles, thanks for your prayers, expect miracles. And a friend of mine came up to me, and he hugged me, and he has, kids our kids' age as well. And he hugged me and he whispered in my ear and he said, Chris, you encouraged us to expect miracles the whole way through. I'm here to tell you that the miracles just started happening. This was just the beginning of the miracles. Don't stop expecting miracles.
Wow.
And we've needed that. I've leaned on that a lot because those first couple of weeks were really hard. Funny things like I put food in front of Olgine and she's like, looks at me like, what is this? And it's like, it's good for you. Eat it. So that's now kind of a joke in our family. Like she'll say to me, Dad, what is this? Is it good for me? Should I eat it? Little things like that, but also really hard. I think, gosh, I can't imagine what it was like for them to be in such a different place, not be able to speak the language. So it took a ton of grace and patience, probably more them with us than us with them.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And every little way, like we were even praying about, it's like, okay, how are we going to educate Algine because she doesn't speak English, but she's older and like English, second language. I do not have a really good homeschooling gene in myself. Like, so how are we going to do this? Like, what does this look like? And then one of the girls that was teaching at our school up at the camp looked at me and said, Michelle, I did my internship in Kenya. Like when I was in college, as English as a second language. She's like, I want to do this. And I was like, you don't have to and she goes, no, I'm not doing this as a favor. Like I have a desire. I want to do this. And I remember going to the school, this makes me tear up too, and having her read us a story in English for the first time. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I didn't get to see her first steps. I didn't get to see this, but I'm getting to watch her read in English for the first time, and that same teacher was the first reader at that teacher's wedding. And she did the first reading. And it was just like those kind of things, like the Lord writes the best stories, like he really does, and it's like his stories are redemptive, and it's good for us to even remember these stories now as we're dealing like deeper in the trenches stuff, and I think our yes, like if we had a blind yes, we just said yes, and we didn't know all that it would entail, because if you figure out like there's a lot of details in that yes, but it's better that we didn't know because it's one step at a time, and the grace is there in the moment, not usually before or, just right in the present moment, dealing with it. Yeah.
Yeah. The part of the story, like our families or friends, and Michelle, you and Heather are, been super close since university. And so I'm watching from afar and hearing via Heather. And then when we're all together, like we visited you guys a couple times, and I remember getting to meet David and Algine the first time. And I had the best dance party. I'll never forget that with David. And my heart was to just bond. I just wanted to love him, and I didn't know anything else to do other than love him. So you guys are now in this interesting flow now, right? Okay, so this crazy dynamic has occurred, but now, quote unquote, normal life is supposed to start. And my hunch is that's when things got really real. Because after a while, they're just maybe, David and Algine are probably just in shock maybe, or they're like, oh, I'm away for a visit. But the reality probably starts to settle in. They start learning the language. Just the thought of you guys putting a plate in front of them, that your desire is to nourish them on the simplest of levels. And they're looking at you going, I don't totally even know who you are. And I'm in your home. You're feeding me. I can't imagine the disorientation of spirit that they would have felt in those moments. And then they go to bed, and then that cycle keeps happening. And you've got all your other kids, right, who are just in the normal flow, right? And so they're normal in the sense of like, I don't take that. I want that, just all that stuff. And just that dynamic is a wild dynamic. But can you bring us now into, so Chris, maybe we start with you. Can you bring us now into normal life? It starts to get normal. And then my hunch is there starts to be interesting, maybe difficult dynamic surfacing, and then probably glorious dynamic surfacing. Like, what's going on for you, and how are you trying to navigate that with them as quote unquote reality starts to set in?
Yeah, one of the things I was amazed at, and people even ask me to this day, is like, what were your other 4 children like during this whole thing? And they have been like rock stars. Like it's so, why would it be any other way? Like that was, and that's helped me a lot because there's never been, there's never been any kind of resistance towards them. So the reality, I think David is the younger one. He just kind of fit right in. I mean, he just kind of went with it and just got along really well. I think Alguine was the one that, she had to learn. Her first education was with 5-year-olds to middle school kids, as she was in our Little Way school and learning to read with that teacher that stayed after extra and helped her, and then went to a school. Actually, they had a lot of international students, which was another gift. In the middle of nowhere, Georgia, there's this international school with all kinds of people from 31 different countries. Like, God is in those. I think it was just in, some of the day-to-day as Alguine was trying to wrestle with those feelings of, do I belong? I mean, I think probably if there's one big question mark that I kind of see in both Alguine and David is, do I belong? And so those were, and I think Michelle has done a good job of this over the years. We all do it well, and we all I think both of us have not done it well. But when we can get down on their level, look them right in the eye, whatever that is, and tell them that we love them and that they belong, and that yes, our other kids. One of the things that I love that Michelle says to David sometimes, he's like, yes, yeah, you weren't born in my body, but you were born in my heart. Like you were. We didn't have any choice with our other 4 kids, but we chose you.
Yeah. Do you think that digested for them, Chris? Do you think they can receive that?
I think that they receive it well when we're eyeball to eyeball. And then they look out at the world and watch videos and watch how other people are acting. And then they start, just like I said, we start to get distracted from the truth, and then lies start creeping in. Wow. And that's when it gets tough.
As you're describing that, I'm thinking about my relationships with some of my spiritual children. And it's almost the exact same thing. There's places of trauma. You've got to be eyeball to eyeball to communicate it. I love you. I want you. You belong. But there's always this doubt. I'm different. I don't belong. I'm not okay. The world tells me, my circumstances tell me this isn't natural. And so it seems like a constant repetition of that over time. And it's still hard to penetrate to the depths, is my experience. I don't know if that fits your experience.
Oh, most definitely, But then I was thinking about it, even like thinking about it this morning, knowing that we were going to do the podcast today. And then it goes back to joint restoration. Like, I think one of the things, the gifts has been that it's actually been my attachment, the Lord healing my attachment wounds actually through our marriage. Me attaching to Chris, because I think one of the things that we don't do well is teach, what does it look like to leave your mother and father and cleave and weave to your spouse, because that's how it's supposed to be, and I realizing like, okay, my attachment like is very humbling. Like, I realized, a counselor said to me a couple of years ago, like, they're going to learn how to regulate their nervous system through you. And friends, you're not regulated. She just called it out. I'm like, ouch, thank you very much. But she's like, but I learned attachment, like regulation, like through relationship, through communion, which is, what John Paul II preaches, which our church preaches. Like, in that relationship has taught me attachment, and therefore it goes down to our children to be able to commune with them. But it is constant. Like, I can still, like, we used to joke when Chris and I were first married, he could tell me he loved me, but if he told me he never leave me, that meant more to me almost than telling me he loved me. But then I see it with my own children, I will never leave you. You are good. We love you. I choose you. Like, it's constant, because it's so easy to believe another narrative. We all do it in different areas, but for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a great story. It was a couple years in, and Alguine had a room on a lower level, kind of because she was a little older. We kind of gave her own little space. And I remember coming back from the camp one day, and Alguine and Michelle got in a little, disagreement. And so I came home, and Michelle just gave me that look, you better go talk to her. And so I did. And so I just asked her kind of what happened, Alguine, what happened, and she's still broken English. And, but she starts just cleaning her room, as some people do, just like, let me just get distracted. And I said, well, what happened? And she's like, well, Mom's mad at me because she says I don't love David well enough. And she says, you can leave now. And so I was like, and I just said, I'm not leaving. And then I said, well, what do you think about that? She's like, I love David just fine. You can leave. And I said, I'm not leaving. And then I waited a little bit. I just sat down, and I just sat down and watched her kind of clean. And then I asked her, I was like, is there anything like we could do maybe better? Because David really needs you. Like, you're his connection to his, his culture and his history and his time in Haiti. And he's really scared still about that. And she says, I will do it. You can leave now. And I just said, like, I'm not leaving. I was just sitting there. And after a little while, she just opens up this little book that happens to be about the Mass, and she's sitting down and she just starts leafing through it. So I kind of slide up to her and sitting next to her, and she's just kind of looking at the pictures. She can't even read at this point, just looking at the pictures. And finally she said, yeah, I should probably go say I'm sorry to Mom. It's like, I think that'd be a good idea. I was like, but I'll give you some time. I'll go upstairs. You just take your time. When you're ready, you come upstairs. And as I was going up the stairs, it just kind of resonated in my mind. It's like, when I said, I'm not leaving, and why was that so impactful for me? Not because it's a great dad thing, which I think it is one of my better moments, but it's what I long to hear every moment of my life. I'm not leaving. That's what I need to hear, that every moment. Yes. So I think those are the moments when I think parenting, and especially in adoption, like we're being loved and formed by the Father and pursued by the Father the way that we're trying our best to pursue these kids.
Yeah. The overlay, like the red things you used to put on the sheet and you could see the secret words, like the overlay that I've watched in your guys' lives and in other lives of people who have adopted children has been one of the greatest lessons to see, like the secrets of the kingdom. Because when you look at somebody, and like Chris, like what you're saying, where you're in that moment, I immediately resonate with both of you because I know the dad experience, but interestingly, I resonate even on a deeper heart level with Alguin, because I'm like, I'm not worthy for you to be in this room. You don't actually, you're just wanting to leave, and let me help you out by just being kind so you'll go away and I can get back to the truth I know will eventually happen. And so I mean, there's so many beautiful layers that are going on by Chris. When you loved well in that moment, you were in turn receiving the Father, new insight, a new revelation about the Father, and you're making a gift of yourself, and your daughter is now receiving insight about the Father as well. It's like when I was doing a lot of therapy, I would call it double time, where I'm being healed and my client was being healed because there was another therapist in the room that I often didn't give credit for. It's just absolutely fascinating. So, Michelle, what are some of the things that you would say? You touched on it with attachment, and I'm hearing you say these wonderful children in some ways healed you, and like they accompanied your healing journey in ways just like you accompanied theirs. Am I taking that too far?
No, I don't think you would take it too far. I don't think, like, I was like just reflecting before we recorded this podcast, the reason why I even went back into counseling a year and a half ago like for me personally, was because something happened with the kids. Both of them knew, and I was like, all right, I've got to go back in. And then having a very wise counselor said, girlfriend, basically, if you're not healed, like you can only give your kids what you have, and like both of them said, they quoted me, I think it's Dr. Dan Siegel, saying like, one of the most healing parts of a kid's story is if their parents know their story well and they're healed well. And especially for a mother, like it is the mother. Like, I mean, I've told you before, Bob, like you're paying for someone else's wounds, like for another mother. They left, but I get to be the punching bag sometimes, and it just even reminding myself, like I even had counseling last week and reminding myself, like I was just telling her about a situation and she's like, you need a theme song. Like when certain situations happen that you need to remember, it's not about you, because oftentimes I'll be like, take it so personally. I will take it. And it's not about me. The behavior is not about me. It's about something deeper. And she's like, I almost want you. And so we're talking about it. She's like, that old Carly Simon song, You're So Vain. You probably think the song is about you. She was like, you need to pause and think and let that be your theme song. Like when you're dealing with a situation, because it's not about you, Michelle. It's about this child and the behavior. But it's so hard to realize that, and, like Chris's attachment was so much more stable and strong, I think, with his parents than mine was. And then I think with losing my dad last year, like it opened up just orphan and attachment places in me that I didn't see coming. Like I just didn't see them. Like it's like, oh, that part's healed. And then it's like his death opened it up. It's like, it was actually like, it's almost safer to go there with him not alive. And it was interesting when I got the news about my dad. Chris was out of town. He was out in California. The other boys half our boys were at school. Sam wasn't coming home, my other one. So David was there when I got back to the house and heard the news. And so he heard the news and he came in and just held me. Like he's the one that comforted me. Like no one else was around. So he was the one that comforted me. It's like, Mom, I'm so sorry. And he wouldn't let go either, you know? And he's not what I would call an overly affectionate child, you know, but he was the one. Yeah. And then it was so interesting. And then 2 months later, I lost my grandfather. It was David, once again, was the one that came and comforted me first. And it was like, okay, there's just a connection there, you know, like, so it is joint restoration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a deep identification in his heart because of what he's gone through with you, and then a deep identification in your heart as you walk into these places where you can really be with them in a whole deeper way, it seems.
Mm-hmm. And I can tell in myself, like even in the last couple of weeks, just a couple of things have happened. I am still more concerned about behavior management than I am about transformation. Just do what I freaking want to do. Right. And I was like, and that's on me. That's on me. Like, you know, I don't want to look at the deeper questions. I just want him to behave.
What is that, Michelle, just to press into that for a second? I know that as well. Your and my stories are similar, and Heather and Chris's stories are more similar. I've always marveled at that dynamic in us as couples. I think I know for me, but when our kids do something and it dysregulates us and we just want them to behave, what's going on, do you think, in you that you're actually looking for that you think behavior will give you?
I think for me, it comes down to control. I think it's chaos. I think chaos, growing up in a house that was full of chaos, you know, and always waiting for the other shoe to drop, you know, and it often almost always did. I want to prevent that happening. Yeah. So I will get hypervigilant and do whatever it takes not to have chaos, you know? So I'm trying to a perfect example is he was going to get out of uniform, which meant he wouldn't be able to do this, which meant, you know, we can prevent this. And when he doesn't want to prevent the chaos, I feel out of control, you know? And so I don't feel safe and secure. So therefore, instead of just allowing it to process or even getting down on his level, I'll strong arm it. Oh, yes, you will. Yeah. This is how we're going to do, you know, and I'll try to control. And I mean, that child, you know, just fight or flight or whatever, he is fight. He is you know, a bulldog, you know, a lot of times. Yeah. Yes, that makes him a great football. I mean, he'll fight you, you know, he'll come straight on and I'll go to his level instead of going up, you know, higher.
Do you think that, I wonder if this is the case, it's what makes me, as what I feel as I hear that, is you and David are potentially very, very similar because he feels the chaos too. He can feel when you're in chaos. And so it causes him to feel chaos. And you both have this mirroring effect, which is probably super freaky, where you ping pong each other and then you went from a 3 to an 8 with hardly seeing each other and almost like you can't see it, but the other one's activating the other one because you keep seeing it's like a mirror. You both are mirroring each other to each other. And then I thought you were the stable one. Well, if you'd behave, I would be the stable one. And then it's yeah. And then I could imagine that's super hard because you're looking at your own wounds in the person in front of you, and the dysregulation, you dysregulate each other.
Yeah.
I will say this, Michelle, I've, you know, from a distance have watched you pour your heart out for your kids and Alguin and David. And it's been amazing, all the while doing it very imperfectly. That is very hard. when you're trying to love well and you keep getting feedback that it's not going right, that makes it extra hard to keep staying in the arena. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I just want to affirm you in that. And maybe I'm affirming myself indirectly because I'm like, I know what you mean, Michelle. But yeah, Bob, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to get more into that in a minute, but we're going to lose Chris here in a second. So I wanted to ask you a question, Chris, before you have to go. Chris has an appointment that he has to meet. When all of that's going on, what's going on inside of you? And then what's helpful and what's not helpful in terms of your responses?
Well, it happened last night, so go ahead, Chris. He watched the whole ping pong match.
Yeah, I think in the moment it's very stressful because I see that they're both spiraling and just feeding off each other, and it's just going to get worse and worse, and almost to the point where it's like you just have to go in separate rooms, like just go do something else because because then they just start trying to hurt each other. They like know each other's, and maybe he's trying to hurt her and she's trying to get control is really kind of what's happening. So I feel like I've participated in that in the past. I think in the last few months, I've committed to every time I have to talk about anything that might even trigger David, it's a sit down. Let's sit down and talk about this. Like, David, I want to sit down with you. He kind of frames it. He knows that we're, and he can stay in those conversations much better. So I would say that that's what works, is to be able to make sure that we're sitting down. Because even for boys or boys that are becoming men, like even standing there, you kind of bow up or you kind of, it's like, no, we're just going to sit down. Like we're on equal, at least eyeball to eyeball, and that we're really, and then trying to really affirm if I think I've said it over and over, like, David, we don't always agree, but every decision that I make, I really try my hardest to do what's best for you and what's best for our family. And I don't always do it perfectly, but I can always maybe go back to that. And, so I think even with Michelle, and I know my story I've not experienced the trauma that I know that Michelle has. And so if I separate myself from it, I'm sad. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what must have happened that this is how, this is your response, and not in a judgmental way, just in like a sad, like, oh my, that's so then, Michelle and I have had lots of conversations about, okay, how do we, how do I invite her into that, of being able to say, and even after that conversation last night, it was like, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish? Not just behavior adjustment. Let's sit down together with David and have a conversation about it.
So your organizational management role,
right,
that you take out on the road, you've learned.
Yeah, what I do on the road has helped me be a better husband and father and friend, I think so.
And probably vice versa.
Like, Chris's big rule is like, we cannot say anything over a text message that's mean or whatever to anyone in our family or to anyone in general. He's like, that's a sit down conversation, Michelle. You can't respond. It's usually with my family of origin, my sisters, like you could shoot back those little
little snark,
little snarky texts, So
So I know you got to go, Chris. So
yes, I do. So thank you so much for having us, Bob and Jake, and this was a joy. I wish we could spend more time together. So maybe this can be the spurring on for not even on the podcast, just as brothers. So,
that would be very good. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Here.
Michelle, thanks for sticking around and chatting a bit further with us. Michelle, could we get into maybe you have devoted yourself to trying to be the best mom that you can be. I've watched it. I've seen you, you become a student of your own soul, and you've become a student of healing and restoration. You're somebody that regularly comes to mind who doesn't necessarily have the degree, but man, you should easily get an honorary degree for all the stuff that you've tried to learn to primarily apply in your immediate life. Like Bob and I's formation has been, about others, and then it indirectly helped us. Yours has been primarily for your immediate family. I'd love to hear about some of the things over the years that you've learned that blessed you in particular in being the parent of children that you've adopted, but maybe even your own kids, because I think there's a lot of moms who will resonate with the struggle. And what I've admired about you is that you've looked the struggle in the eye and tried to work through it instead of running from it. What comes to mind when you think about things that you've learned and that were important for you?
I think for me, in the last 2 or 3 years, watching some things happen with my other children and realizing, okay, all right, we're going to change this. And there was almost, my counselor calls it like the transitional character, where it's a person in a generation that says like the curses will no longer go. We're going to stop them here in this generation, and it's blessings that go forth, And so, but how do you do that? Like, that's a great idea in theory, but like, how do you do that? And then I think realizing like in the last 2 or 3 years, like I've cut my schedule back. Like my travel schedule is very few and far between. I accept maybe 2 or 3 speaking engagements a year now. I am home base. Like I am home. And I think part of it was just my adrenals, I was exhausted, but I think part of it, that exhaustion came from just emotion. Like it was all interconnected, my body stuff and everything like that. So just really asking the Holy Spirit, like, where do you want me to go and how do you want me to heal? And then him opening doors that really to places and tools that I shouldn't have had access to, like, cause some of the things I'm like, like you're saying, Jake, I'm like, I don't have the qualifications to go into these trainings, but the Holy Spirit like just opened some doors. And I think like for the one big one was, I think just doing some stuff with Safe and Sound Protocol, which is Dr. Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory and just what he learned and learning really how to create safe environments, and the Safe and Sound Protocol is you listen to music and the sound waves actually regulate your nervous system. And so like it's going through and it's actually funny because I'm actually about to do another training on it next week and start David, my other son again, and myself, because you can do ongoing training, and listen to the music and it helps you get up to the higher levels of your brain where you're not on the lower levels, fight or flight and all of that, freeze, all of that kind of stuff. I think what's really been big for me is the Lord has just provided some really good somatic practitioners.
Can you explain what that means?
So somatic is really about your body. Like trauma gets lodged and stored in your body, everything from your gut to your joints and all this kind of stuff. And I think for me, the last year and a half, realizing like I did not have a relationship with my body. Like I was basically living, like a practical heresy. I mean, I really thought they were divided, but someone said, what is your body saying to you? And I'm like, we don't speak the same language. I don't know. What is it saying to me? Because I just had beat it into submission and realizing like, oh my gosh, my shoulders get hunched up. I'm carrying responsibility that's not mine. This is happening like when I'm tired, when I'm overwhelmed. And so a somatic practitioner is someone that can help you release that in your body, like by whether it's stretching or massage or whatever. The problem is, and I can get on a big soapbox about this one, but I won't. But the problem is a lot of it is wrapped up into a lot of new age stuff. And so you have to be very discerning about who you allow to do that. And my thing is like, I really feel like the church should be on the forefront of this because it's sacramental. It's really like a sacramental way to live, an incarnational way to live, and not on the back of it. So for me, I have a really good like Pilates instructor, and they do fascio release and all that kind of stuff, and realizing, like where am I storing trauma, in my body?
Describe, because a lot of people won't know that term, fascia release.
So that is like a tissue and like in your body. And so literally they'll press on it and they will do different exercises and press on it. And it's usually like in a very calming environment. And she's really good. Like she'll let me, like invite the Holy Spirit into this moment and press on it. And like, it's almost like this muscle is tight and the way that she gently presses on, then you can just feel the release. And then I call it, this is not a medical term. And I call it, then you can feel like the ooey gooey in your body. Like it feels like, totally it almost feels like fluid.
Jelly.
Yeah. Jelly coming like, because something releases, something comes out. And when I tell you, when I come out of those sessions, like every single time, one, it's toxins are coming out of your body. So you feel it that way. But two, like I know, like I have an appointment next week. I know I can't schedule anything else on those days. I've learned because oftentimes I will just cry and the Lord will bring up a memory and I will just cry, and just release things that haven't been there.
I just had a session with Dr. Tom, who
Yes.
He's great. He prays with you, and just really powerful. How are you bringing that back then, your own healing back to your children, all your children, including the adopted children, in terms of the physical awareness of their bodies and how they carry the trauma?
The physical awareness of their bodies, like one of the things is like, I realized the safety and security are felt. It's not something you can tell someone you're safe. It's not a logical thing. It's felt in the body, so like creating environments that are safe, like whether it's dinners or stuff like that. For like take for David, for instance, if I make him a bath with certain salts that have a smell, because smell triggers like especially implicit memories, learning all this. So they have a scent that I actually put in the room, like in a diffuser. And then there's a scent like I'll put in a hot bath and then I'll make him a bath and he'll get in there, and sometimes he'll let me massage and touch. Sometimes he does. It depends on like if he had a tough football game or not, like his muscles or whatever, but it's those kind of environments, it's easier with my youngest daughter. Like she's like, hold me still. Like, I mean, there's like, she'll let you hold her, but it's realizing, having to study your child and realizing what works for one child doesn't work for another child. And like, all right, what somatically can I do for them? Like some of my other kids, like that are off at college, are still big, like will come up and crawl in your lap. I mean, even though they tower over me, it just depends on the child. But actually, teaching them how to be aware of their body is a big thing. Like just giving them the tools to like, all right, what is your body sensing? All right, you're stressed, like where, why, where are you feeling it in your body? Like giving them language, because we're all learning the language, I think. Yeah.
My daughter, Kristen, as you know, is working through, and you've been a good influence on her, and I've been passing along stuff that you've learned, but she's talking about introception, right?
Yes.
Which is the awareness, the internal awareness of the body. And when you're hungry and not hungry, just the different places where your body's feeling stressed, those kind of things.
Michelle, I just want to touch on it for a moment because our listeners might be hearing this and I don't think they can appreciate your formation. So I want to put you a little bit in context. Like you have been walking with the Lord faithfully for a very long time. You have done a lot of theological formation. That's where you and I met. Well, we were at Auburn together, but then we met, explicitly at Franciscan. And you're not somebody like, you know the faith well, and you're very well formed in the faith. And I think something that I've seen you do, which I agree with you, this is starting to become something that's a bit cutting edge in the healing realm. But a lot of Catholics, I think, will have an aversion to it because of a distrust. And I want to affirm that there's been no compromise in your orthodoxy while you've pressed into these dynamics. And it's actually fairly simple from a rational point of view. Like our bodies are given by God and our bodies have systems. And as we mature in our understanding of somatic things, we learn how those systems work and how the body-soul interaction works. And what I've seen you do is to me, you get the soul, you understand the soul quite well. And now I'm watching you come to understand the body and the body-soul connection and how you can actually experience emotional healing via a physical means. And we've seen it the other way where, maybe you forgive somebody and you stop having stomach pains, or a memory gets healed. Like I used to see this all the time where you'd work through a trauma and a person's body would calm down because they're not carrying the trauma. But to go the other direction is something that I think is very good. And like you're saying, it is sacramental. Like our bodies are what make us human. And so interestingly, when we think about healing, for some reason we segregate the body as, I'm just carrying it along. And what I've loved about what you're doing is you've gone, no, that's not right, and have gone into these various domains, including like, so safe and sound protocol, just, it's a neurological dynamic that's activating somatic and emotional regulation, that's healing current as well as past dynamics. And it sounds silly, like, oh, you just listen to music? Well, you don't understand, like, oh, you just eat a wafer that a priest prayed a prayer over, and now it's all of a sudden Jesus. Like, come on. Like, let's be a bit respectful of the dynamics and the deeper dynamics that are occurring. So could you take one more step into safe and sound protocol? Because you're being, simple Because I've heard via Heather how you've put a lot of time and a lot of study into this.
Yeah. And if I can add to his question, and this would be a good place for us to walk into, I know we've had a conversation after you went through it and the experience you experienced, and then how your son David immediately responded to you in that. And so I think if you can just kind of describe the process a little more, what you went through, what happened in your own body, and then what happened in the dynamics between you, I think that'll be helpful for everybody.
Yes, and it is. It seems like it's too simple or too good to be true, Jake, like what you were saying when you listen to it. So you listen to it for these music, and they're at a certain frequency wave that like really regulates your nervous system systematically, and you listen to it whether 10 or 15 minutes. Also, like when you do it, you create a peaceful environment. Like, so you try to create a peaceful environment. You can't have any other distractions around you. So you just listen and you just be present. Also, one of the things that the person that trained me advises you to do is like you diffuse a certain scent or an oil, and they give you a certain list because like there's certain ones that are peaceful. And like I was saying, smell, is implicit memory. Like it'll go back into your memory.
Let me interject very quickly for people going, what, Michelle, you've got this smelly thing going on. Just here's the neurology very, very quickly. Your olfactory part of your brain is one of the most powerful parts of your brain, and it can actually bypass various neurological systems and access memory some of the best ways, better even than recalling a memory, speaking about a memory. Scent is one of the most powerful senses to activate the limbic system, which is where memory is stored, and it's also where emotional regulation occurs. So this whole put on a smell thing, it's actually very sound neurology. It's very well researched. It's there, so it's kind of common over here in the neurology world. And in the spiritual world, we kind of go, well, that sounds weird. Well, there's a reason that incense has a smell.
I was about to say incense, yes.
That's right.
There's things going on in the physical world that the scientific world is learning, and when you integrate those, it's really powerful. So this isn't just some random, you went to the essential oil shop and the person goes, oh, do this one, do peace and calm, it makes you feel better. And there's a lot more thought and rationale behind it for people who are going, what? It's legitimate. It's legitimate science. So
it is. And it's a legitimate science, like even looking at the oil, like I said, you can go into the New Age thing, or you could look at it biblically.
Amen.
Like what myrrh does, it gets rid of bitterness. Right. What frankincense does, it does this. And like there's reasons, like they have healing properties, like that, we are people of oil. Then when you listen to this music, like it does something to you because the frequency wave and all that, it regulates your nervous system. I pray through it. Like I will pray and just get really, really quiet, and you will realize it. And then when you come out of it, like there's a whole sheet that it goes with it. Like you have to say, like from 1 to 10, how are you feeling this way? Like, are you feeling peaceful? Where are you? Do you feel regulated? There's a whole systematic approach, a scientific approach that you do before and after. Yes. And then you have to wait and see like, okay, like 24 hours to do it again. And see, like, do you feel regulated? Do you not? If you are lower than like a 5 on your regulation scale, 1 through 10, you can't do it the next day because you need to make sure things like level out in your peace. Like it's really interesting, but it is something about the sound wave, and it almost like a lot of people say it almost like mimics the womb. There's a certain sound that the womb has that like regulates you. And I know like for like I administered it for Sister Miriam. Like for her, when she would do it, she would really pray it. Pray like that, like she was in the womb of Mary, like really pray it that way, like a visual prayer. And so to do it that way, but like the Lord meets you. One of the things I'm discovering is he meets you where you're at in your healing journey. And for me, he's met me what speaks to me. So for me, sound speaks to me, creation speaks to me, nature speaks to me. One of the other certifications I've gotten is art therapy this year. I went back for art therapy. It is amazing because beauty, bypasses the brain, is what you were saying, Jake, and goes straight to the heart. And it was amazing for me to see because all my kids are really good artists. So I can allow them to, like, we started doing the art therapy to learn how to process emotions, and it was really interesting. like in last May, I actually did it with the CFRs at their healing retreat that I did with Sister Miriam. And then when I first started to do it with them, like a lot of them, like one of them's like almost like a nuclear engineer or whatever. They're all looking at me like, okay, we love you, but what are you doing? You know? And then we started and it was unbelievable. Like the breakthrough that happened. Like one of the postulants was like, oh, I really think I struggle with anger, And the formator, Father Innocent's like, you're coming at the beginning of the year and not the end of the year. Like next year, like he goes, awesome. Wow. Yeah. And then one of them that was so intellectual, like he had this amazing breakthrough that he just said, because he wasn't trying to think about it rationally. And I was just like, oh, but that speaks to my heart as an artist. Sound speaks to my heart. Like I truly believe, like as Tolkien and C.S. Lewis said, that the Lord sung the world into existence. Sound and beauty, you know, like so he meets you where you are to heal you. And so he's given me the things that stir my heart as the tools to heal my family. So I think they all, you know, go together so
what
beautifully.
Happened with David? So you started doing Safe and Sound, and what your experiences of it, how did it impact the home particularly, David?
I think it impacted the home because I was peaceful and I was regulated and I was a safe place for him to come closer to. I was a place, like I know y'all have said it in previous podcasts, like with the mother is a place where people can rest, like that in her truest form, like that's who she is. Because my system was at rest, my children could rest in me. And it was funny because we were talking about the last 3 months have been really crazy. And especially for me, like I can feel that, like the dysregulation in me, which therefore affects the dysregulation in our house, you know, and it just goes together because we're community people. And like, that's why I was like, we're going back to the basics. And it was interesting because people would come into my house, like especially my mom that comes and visits every couple months. Like when she came in, she's like, what is going on in here? It is so peaceful in your home. So not that it was like crazy, but she's like, there's a peace here that wasn't there before. Because I think David was able to rest in me because I was peaceful, you know? And I think this is where it goes, where healing cannot be done just strictly in isolation. Like there's a solitude part and a silence part, but it has to be done through communion, you know? And that is where, so then we go back to the basics of relationship. Like you're healed, you're hurt in relationship, but you're also healed in relationship, you know?
Yeah. Beautiful. Couple thoughts as I reflect on that. I know we have to stop here in a few minutes, but as my daughter Kristen has been doing that with her daughter, she notices that there's different responses in her two children who were from the same family, but just their own particular way in the Safe and Sound protocol of how they will react in the next 24 hours. And so she was just explaining that to me. And it's not like this one size fits all. It's very unique and individual. And everybody has their own individual response to it. And she's learning how to meet each of them, even the amount of time with the music, when to do it, how to do it, what are their activities to plan or not plan, because they're going to do that Safe and Sound protocol. So I think that was a really interesting insight for me, is it's not just where you calm down, but when you calm down, there could be reactivity that comes afterwards because trauma then can manifest in a particular way. And then how do you do that as a parent? Like if you go through the Safe and Sound protocol or any other way of calming and building safety, and that safety allows the trauma to come up, then what? You know, so in your experience, what do you do there?
I think of this, and that is why, like, when people ask me, like, okay, why have you pulled back from so many other things? And part of me is like, I want to say, do you know what goes on in a day? Like, do you really know what goes on in a day in our life? Because our house has to actually be a place of healing, and that takes a lot of work. And when my daughter went through it, she's experienced so much more trauma in her life. I had to make sure we made time and space for other things, and they came out all wonky. Like for her, like she had, she started like sleepwalking and not realizing that she was sleepwalking, like, because there was so much there, you know? So you have to go back, bring her back to like a safe spot where you have to talk like in a soothing voice. You have to create room for her. You have to actually allow her to sleep. A lot of times, like, it helps you sleep better, you know, because your body is at rest, and it hasn't been, because it's been on fight or flight. So, and then this is where you just really also have to pay for the Holy Spirit's discernment, you know, which is the big thing I think is like just making space for whatever to happen.
Yeah. For my one granddaughter, who's the younger one, she is actually sleeping less well since she's been doing the Safe and Sound protocol, which Kristen's really been puzzled with that because she's seen a difference, positive difference, but it's affected her sleep. So there can be a lot of different reactions.
It is. And it's, and this is where the body is so interesting, and for me, like I have to submit all of my findings to someone that is actually a psychologist, like a doctorate in this. And she monitors everything that I say. Like we had a situation with one of ours and she's like, you've got to stop for at least 4 or 5 days, because it's too much on their nervous system all at one time.
That's like a spiritual director for your body in a way,
It is. It really is. And I also realized, because I am not an overly consistent person, like I want to be like, oh, let's be a thing. I realized consistent rhythms are huge when you're doing stuff like this. And that is like what I was saying before, partly why I'm home 95% of the time. I have to be that consistency. Like consistent rhythms are huge because it brings structure, and that structure brings connection, And so we've had to put some like anchors in our day for our whole family that we really stuck to, I mean, you all try to do it, and then you're like, after 2 weeks, you're like, okay, whatever. Like we've actually stuck to them, and we just had to make them really simple because I want to do grandiose ones, and they're like, no, night prayer at 9:30, just a decade of the rosary, like, but we stick to it, and it's simple,
That's great. Yeah.
Michelle, as we wrap up, and to loop back into the theme of adoption, what have you learned about the heart of God in adoption that you would just want to maybe pass on to our listeners, because all of us are adopted into the kingdom and to the family of God. So just in particular, you being a parent and a representative of God to your children, what have you learned about the heart of God in this process?
I think there's a special place. I feel like there's an attack on the orphan. Like in scripture says, the widows and the orphans are his favorites. There's such an attack on it. Like I think the families that we've journeyed with closely that have done adoption, it's hard. Like it's hard and it's messy. But the Lord's, like Dr. Peter Levine says, it's never too late to have the childhood you deserved, And so, and I love that saying because that's the Lord. That is regeneration. That's redemptive. But I think the heart of the Father is this pursuit of love. It is a pursuit of love, and I will not leave you orphans. Like that is what he says. And I just see that the Holy Spirit, more so than anything, I relied on the Holy Spirit, but he is the comforter, and he will come. Like the Lord will come and he will meet you where it's at. And his redemption plan is just beautiful. It is the most beautiful story, is the story of redemption and salvation history.
Amen. Listeners, we hope that this has blessed you today to be able to hear from Chris and Michelle. And we'll put links in the show notes to all the various things that Michelle's mentioned and some of the things that maybe you could check out that maybe be a blessing in your own families. So, Michelle, thanks so much. Thanks for being on. And please.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for
We're so
having me.
grateful. So, listeners, thanks so much. And we will talk to you again soon.